All right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to MMA this weekend. The next 2 days, we are going to look at the subject, the cycle of phases and aspects. Today, we are going to go through part one. You can see on this opening screen the 8 phases that we're going to be looking at over the next 2 days. Before we do that, I'm just going to give you my one housekeeping slide that tells you what I do in the world of evolutionary astrology and how you can get a hold of me if you want to. Let me get going with my mouse now. I have been doing forecasting astrology for, oh gosh, probably almost 3 decades. Right now, we do a free new and full moon audio podcast, which you can find on our website. We have collected a lot of material during these last several decades, and we've put them all together in our Astro Library, which, by the way, our YouTube channel got hacked at Mercury retrograde in Scorpio 6-7 months ago, and we lost everything. We got it back. That's an adventure. And I'll show you that with my chart tomorrow. But all of our materials was there. And so now that we got our YouTube channel back, our Astro Library's back, we're running a half price special if you want to go check it out. Of course, my forte is actually teaching evolutionary astrology. I ran Jeffrey Wolf Green School from 2002 to 2008 and consultations. I work with a lot of people. I work with almost every subject you can imagine through the lens of evolutionary astrology. So, most of us are familiar with the phases of the sun and the moon. That new moon, here we are starting this weekend workshop just after a North Node lunar eclipse at about 15.5 degrees Gemini Sag. So, we've all probably felt this full moon energy over the last few days. What we are looking at here is taking those phases and aspects that many of us understand through the sun and the moon, and we are applying it to every single planet and point in space. We call this the cycle of phases and aspects. It was first really spoken about by Dane Rudier in his book, The Lunation Cycle. Jeffrey Wolf Green was an avid fan of Dane Rudier, and he took that concept of Dane's and then extrapolated it as we do now into all of these planets. Every planet and point in space is in a phasal relationship with every other planet and point in space. There may or may not be an aspect. So we're going to spend the next 2 days working our way through these 8 phases and these aspects that you see on your screen. And we won't have examples with every single one for time constraints, but we are going to have several examples. And I tried to pick chart aspects that weren't all commonly known. It says Jackie's waiting in the lobby, Julie. So do you want to do what you need to do, or can I do it? Can I let her in? Maybe you can unmute because I think I might lose recording. I'm
Right.
going.
Yes, you can do that. You won't lose the recording.
Okay. So is there an easy way to tell me?
When it says, can you click on Jack wherever it says
Yeah.
Jackie is waiting?
Yeah, I'm clicking on it, but it's not doing anything.
Okay.
It's not letting me do anything.
So could you move out of full screen mode or
Yes. We'll stop sharing. Admit. Okay, there you go.
you? Okay.
Yes. Jackie, thank you. I think I see that you've made it in. So,
Yes, and thank you for muting yourself, Jackie. Yep, so I think we can come back to your share the screen and we're
sure.
all good.
I've got my screen, but it's not showing me with the little um recording capabilities. So,
Oh, We are still recording.
Okay,
Recording
yes.
is in
Okay. Yep.
progress.
Just double checking. I get real techno um when it comes to recordings because there's nothing like speaking for 2 hours and then finding out you've got to do it all over again.
I know what you mean.
And so, yes, we will work with some aspects that are a little less well known than, say, a trine or an opposition, although I have some of those in, just to kind of flesh out this whole cycle for you and let you learn it from a different perspective. And so, here's an actual list for you in regard
Kim,
to, yes, go ahead.
sorry, you are not sharing your screen, so you'll have to redo.
Okay, so thank you. That's why we're doing this. Okay, so go right here, here, here.
Yes, you are sharing now. And if you could put, yes, it's full
Now
screen,
we're
all
doing
good.
it. Okay.
I'm muting myself now.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah. So the recording probably got everything that I said from that point or that I was saying before this screen was sharing. And so here's an actual listing for you of just the 8 phases and their names as we work with them. And something that I will say from a technical perspective is that after we have all these recordings and my IT husband, Leroy, suggested that I make 6 different recordings instead of 2 long ones because it will be easier for everybody to reference it later on. Um, we will send all that to you, and all these PowerPoint slides, you will be able to download them and or print them out if you want to. So you're going to have this for an easy reference after the fact when and Leroy also, I'll tell you this too. Leroy doesn't just make an MP4 file. He makes an MP3 audio file. We call that the walking the dog file so that you can just listen to everything that's being said. And so there's 3 different ways that he puts all this together for us so that it gives you the widest variety in being able to access the materials. So if you're writing frantically, if you can take a breath if you want, you're going to have all of this, all right? And so life and us, we are always in a state of continuous change, growth, evolution, and devolution when that body, that temple of our soul wears out. And this desire to always become. We know that through that archetype of Mars, Aries, in first house in evolutionary astrology. Mars is that instinctive desire to act. It's the leading edge of our conscious desire nature, as we say. And in case we have somebody who's not aware of this, from the perspective of Jeffrey Green evolutionary astrology, the planet and its sign and house rulership is one archetype. The sign is not different than the house. So Mars, Aries, first house, the Venus inner side with Taurus and the second, one archetype. The Venus outer side with Libra, seventh house, one archetype. And we've always said if you're a beginner and you learn those 12 archetypes, it is one of the ways to simplify getting a foundation to astrology in general that then you can expand into combining a sign, a house, and a planet, which is what we really do with the cycle of phases and aspects. And so from 0 to 360, it's a complete cycle of evolution, birth, growth, bloom, decay, and death to rebirth again. And one more time, as I had said earlier, every planet and point in space is in a phasal relationship to every other planet and point in space. So an aspect is understood from within the phase first. So when you're starting to put an aspect between 2 planets together, you start with their phasal relationship. That's the foundation. Are they waxing or waning together? 0 to 180 is waxing, 180 to 360 is waning. You fill in that specific phase, then you start to fill in a specific aspect, and this is what we're going to do. And one more time, there may or may not be an aspect, but people will come up to me with as clients or learning, and they'll go, I don't have any aspects to my Venus. And I go, oh, yes, you do. Venus is in relationship to every other planet in your chart. And so it can make a plethora of deepening the understanding of any planetary archetype. I mean, if you think about us as human beings, we're kind of complicated. And astrology is that natural language that just explains that complication of who we are. And we're going to use that cycle of phases and aspects to learn our language better, so we can read that language and speak that language. Now, one of the foundations to evolutionary astrology is what we will call the evolutionary states, and they're states of consciousness. And a chart will not tell you gender, and a chart will not tell you the evolutionary state of the soul in question. You have to have what we call observation correlation. You've got to have that interaction and feedback with someone. That is why those of you who volunteered, I asked you to fill out a few environmental conditioning questions. Jackie's waiting in the lobby again, Julie. Shall we pause? I might be able to get the hang of this. And so,
Yes, thank you
yep,
for doing this.
stop sharing, admit, and let's just.
Yeah, she's in, and I will contact her offline. She's not connected with her stuff yet,
Sure,
but
sure.
we
Okay.
can resume, and she's in. Thank you.
All right, you betcha. Okay, here we go. And so, okay, good. Everything disappears. And so, again, I've explained this to people. These evolutionary states, they're expanding states of consciousness or awareness. And if you look at your screen right here, the consensus smallest circle, they're the least aware of anything beyond the space time they're born into. That individuating is trying to break free from consensus and go, what is truth for me? And then we expand into that spirituated state of consciousness, which understands timeless, universal, natural laws and principles. We'll fill in more details to these three as we go through actual examples with charts. But I wanted to make this point. And then if you've been a student of Jeffrey Green astrology for a while, here is his own teachings from his first book on Pluto to the second, and then the last live school that he actually taught. And you can see how his concepts of what we considered, especially consensus, was a little bit lessening, and the spirituated actually was a little bit growing and expanding. Who knows what the absolute is? However, she left the meeting again. You probably know that, Julie. I have a tendency to say about 7 out of 10 of us, cowbells around our neck. 2 out of 10, I'll think for myself. 1 out of 10, do you not see all of the climate change, thinking we can have dominion over nature? How foolish are we? Enough said. Again, more on that later as we go through charts. Here is the basics of how we will determine aspects between planets. We always make the slower moving planet the 0 point, the starting point. And because the planets move through the circle in a counterclockwise fashion, we take the faster moving planet and move through the zodiac signs or houses until we get to where its position is. And so let me give you 2 examples here. This first one is Mercury to Pluto. If you can see this on your screen, Mercury is 9 degrees Leo, 50 minutes. Pluto is 10, Leo 35. Pluto is moving slower than Mercury. So Pluto becomes the starting point right here. And we go all the way around this inner circle till we get to Mercury. Mercury is a balsamic conjunction. It is not a new phase conjunction. It would be right here where Venus is if it was a new phase conjunction. It is a balsamic finishing up conjunction. If we look at the relationship that Venus has to Pluto, Venus is hanging out here at 21 and a half Leo. We again start with Pluto, and this is this outer line right here. And we barely move, 11 degrees to get to Venus. And evolutionary astrology uses wide orbs. And with conjunctions, oppositions, squares, you can take that orb out there 5, 10 degrees. Venus 11 degrees beyond Pluto, we would start to consider that a phasal relationship. So Venus's new phase to Pluto. From the perspective of reincarnation with this example, it would be that Venus has had maybe a prior lifetime or two coming in, that new phase conjunction to Pluto. And so Venus is starting to get a little bit of a grasp on that new journey within its soul of discovering that Venusian self-reliance and self-love and how to take care of myself and be responsible for my own soul. Now, there is an area from Jeffrey Wolf Green's teachings where I have evolved into differentiating. And that is, as I've done forecasting for 3 decades, writing forecast and then speaking forecast, I have shifted to comparing the sun to the outer planets. Jeffrey Green's original teachings, every planet's compared to the sun. It is the center of the solar system. It is a life force. None of us would be here without it. Correct. For me, coming from a geocentric perspective, living on Earth, watching the sun move so much faster than these outer planets, this is what I have been teaching for, I don't even know, last 3 to 5 years. I compare the inner planets to the sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. However, I compare the sun to the outer planets. As you can see on your screen, Jupiter, Saturn. I put Chiron and Eris in here as well. I did not put Eris in our charts, though. I kept it with the basic planets we all know today. I didn't put any asteroids in either. Astrology gets complicated really easy, and I want to just be as clear as possible for all of you. So in this example with the sun, though, here, in the case of what I'm speaking about, because Saturn moves slower than the sun, Saturn becomes the starting point here. It's hanging out at 26.5 degrees Saturn. The sun is over, Cancer. The sun is over here at 1347 Cancer. So we start with Saturn and we go around this outer circle all the way. And what we find is that the sun is balsamic phase Saturn. It's about 13 degrees from Saturn, which would be 347 degrees or something like that. So it's not quite a conjunction yet, but it's moving towards it. It is balsamic phase to Saturn. By the way, if any of you are curious, this is actually the chart of George Bush Jr., the one who was president before, I think it was Bill Clinton or after Bill Clinton. Yes, the one who was president after Bill Clinton. So now you know how long I've had this slide. I thought, well, that chart works. So if you wanted to revisit George Bush's chart, he was an Aries soul. All those communication gaps that he was a little bit known by. Sometimes that Mercury balsamic Pluto can be a good conversationalist. And sometimes Mercury balsamic Pluto, it's the last of the 8 phases. It starts to get quite Piscean. The concept's in my head, but I can't really get it out for you. So, determining aspects to the nodal axis, we're going to work with aspects to the nodes as the very last section tomorrow. So a heads up, as we get through the 8 phases, then we're going to have some examples of nodal axis aspects to planets. And the final section we'll look at forecasting planets to the natal chart. And so I will just briefly say here that because the mean motion of the nodal axis, north node, south node, is retrograde 90% of the time, we will always start with the planet, regardless of the planet, and we will then move the nodes in a clockwise fashion, the way they naturally move through the zodiac, reversing through signs and houses. And so here's an example for you right here. And so let's look at the Uranus is right here at 19.9 degrees Gemini. And if we start with this outer green circle, we go all the way around to the North Node at 19 Gemini 36. The North Node is a balsamic conjunction aspect. It's less than half a degree or half a degree. So this is a very tight Uranus North Node conjunction. But that North Node is a balsamic conjunction to Uranus. So there is something about moving the ego, North Node, forward that is having to resolve in a conscious Gemini objective manner to information, to individualizing Uranus. Another one of those communication situations, if you remember George Bush Jr. in history. Enough on that, but let's start with Uranus again. And we will follow the inner circle to the south node. And that south node is making a waxing gibbous opposition aspect to Uranus. And so it takes a little while sometimes to really learn to move these nodes backwards. But the beauty is that we've got computers that will help us do it. And for those of you who use Solar Fire, I'm actually going to show you how we will create that differential listing so that you can save yourself a lot of math in regards to doing that. But you get the hang of it, and I will also show you little things with semi-squares and sesqui-squadrates as well as we are moving forward. Briefly, we'll also look at this one in more detail as well. When there are planets square the nodes in evolutionary astrology, that planet skips back and forth between those two nodes. It means both the north node and the south node were active in past lives. And you have to find what we call the resolution node. Remember, you always start with the planet. In this case, for this example, Pluto is literally at 1600 Virgo, clockwise, reversing through signs and houses. The north node, if you follow the purple line here, the nodes are applying squares to Pluto. If the nodes were on this blue line at 16 degrees, Gemini Sag, it'd be an exact square to Pluto. And if the nodes were on the green line at 12 degrees, they would be separating squares to Pluto. And so we will look at an actual example of a planet squaring the nodes later tomorrow. So this is just an initiation for you in case we are seeing things in chart and we are working through that. Now, if anybody has questions with what I've just said, you're welcome to interact. You're welcome to even type it through the chat area. Julie will speak up for me. That was going through this a little fast. And I am always willing to slow down if you want me to. we are going to move into now our actual material. So, one more time on your screen, here is this cycle of phases and aspects. And so, we are literally going to start with the new phase, which is what you see highlighted on your screen. And you can see in this inner circle that these 8 phases alternate between yang and yin energy. Yang is always energy moving out from the center to express. Yin is always energy moving back into the center. And they have that alternation. And this is something that I might point out for you right now. You will notice that these phases, it's the circle 360 divided by 8. It's the harmonics of 8. And when you take 360 divided by 8, you get 45. So each one of these phases is 45 degrees. And you can pay attention to that 45, 90, 135, 180, 225, 270, 315, and 360. Anytime you have aspects between two planets that are right on those 45-degree marks, approaching it, just after it, applying or separating, as we say, there's always going to be tension because that yin-yang energy is shifting and it can be uncomfortable for the two planets or the planet and point involved in shifting that energy. They've had 45 degrees to get used to it one way. Now they've got to do it the opposite. That is a basic to understand. And, in astrology, we're taught to pay attention to those squares and oppositions. I'm here to say the semi-squares and the sesquisquadrates are just as tension-filled. They are just as active. And I wish somebody would start putting them in the calendars. We see the inconjuncts. I'm an advocate for semi-squares and sesquisquadrates in our calendars. Anybody have any influence, talk to publishers, okay? But you can see that comes just from the yang and the yin, energy out, energy in, and that shifting that takes place at every one of those 45-degree angles. And what you're going to find as we move through this is we're going to look at each one of those points as it finishes a phase and begins a phase. And so, when we move into the new phase, that key phrase for it is instinctual emergence. It is literally that energy rebirthing and moving out. And so what we have is a brand new evolutionary intention that is initiating a new relationship between any two planets. And as we find with that 0 degrees and planets just inside the ascendant, for example, that absolute need for freedom to experience and act in all kinds of directions, that diversity of experience in order to start manifesting things in new ways. And, this is similar to that, again, Mars, Aries, first house energy. And we find that with that archetype, you can talk to your blue in the face. I raised a first house Pluto sun. They have got to go through action and reaction, feedback from the opposite full phase, feedback from others. That's how they learn. There has to be that experience between those two planets when they are in a new phase to each other. And part of this energy is the reason it is so strong is they are really trying to break free from the past, break free from whatever came before, break free from the last lifetimes when those two planets were in a balsamic relationship to each other. So there can be this unconscious fear between these two planets' new phase that they're going to be pulled back into the past. They don't have that energy to go forward. And so it's just an absolute, push, 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 because they're afraid of being pulled backwards. Every time you look at a phase, you understand it better through its opposite phase. Think of understanding, Taurus through its polarity Scorpio. Think of understanding Cancer through its polarity Capricorn. We have 12 archetypes in the zodiac. However, we have 6 polarities. And we completely understand an archetype by its opposite archetype. This is true for all 8 phases as well. And so the opposite of new phase is full phase. And this is where, as we just shared on the last screen, with full phase, people, almost like that Libra energy, half a Scorpio if you take 45 degrees, others will always give us feedback. Hey, you're stepping on my toes. You can't act that way blindly. You have to take me into consideration. What will also happen when 2 planets are in new phase to each other is it can feel like that opposite full phase. Everybody else knows it better, does it better than we do. So there can be some insecurity with new phase, not only from the pull from the past, but also because it can seem like everybody else has been there, done that. They get it, they know it, they do it better than we do. So, new phase, and hopefully as we move into individuated or expand into individuated and spirituated states of consciousness, those 2 planets in new phase can learn how to listen. The full phase relating to Libra, that is that psychology of listening. So can we listen to others as we still intuit how to move forward and initiate for ourselves in new ways? So let's look at some aspects that belong in this phase. When we are working with 0 degrees, and here we're working with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can, depending on the planets, especially sometimes if it's an outer planet and an inner planet, take it up to almost 8, 9, 10 degrees, and it's still operating like a conjunction aspect. These planets, again, are rebirthing, they're initiating, they are uniting together so that this new evolutionary purpose and cycle between them can be acted upon in an instinctual way. The closer that conjunction is, 0, 1, 2 degrees, that new cycle is projected out there spontaneously without egocentric awareness. It's instinctual. I've just got to do it. This feels right. It is act-react. It is unchecked energy. It goes all over the place the tighter the new phase conjunction. It is necessary to have the random experiences to then see where it goes. I'll give you an example quickly. When I see a forecasting planet new phase over a natal planet, I say you're going to get intuitive hits in half a dozen or more directions that you want to experience something. You might act upon, 4 or 5 of them, and it goes, nope, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. Well, there's going to be 2 or 3 that actually follow through the next step. And as time goes by and that forecasting planet moves beyond that natal one, 6, 10, 15 degrees, those random experiences will slowly start to narrow for you. So we're going to jump in right now with a chart. Our first one Eileen, if you would be willing to unmute yourself on the screen
Hello.
here. Hello there. Thank you.
Hi.
This person was raised by two parents, stay-at-home mom. Dad lost job as a teenager, which was significant for her. Angelican background. She was the oldest of 8, and she had 7 younger brothers. Fourth house Pluto. Whew. She joined, Royal Canadian Air Force was my guess at the initials. Career in that, married someone there. She has 2 daughters, currently works as an underwriting assistant. What we are going to be focusing on today for you is the Mercury Sun new phase. I specifically chose a chart where the planets weren't in a conjunction aspect like Venus is to Neptune. I wanted to move beyond that phase just a little bit here. So remember, Sun is the starting point with the inner planets. And in this case, we are going to go, got my little cheat sheet here, 13 degrees and 22 minutes to get to Mercury. So they are in the same signs, they are in the same houses. But the fact that we've got a little over 13 degrees between them means that this soul has had experience, just Sun, Mercury, Sun, creative self-actualization, personality, really wanting to express herself in this lifetime. Mercury, the conscious left brain and how we process information. When we look at these 2 planets together in Mercury, we're going to start to understand that 13 degrees of separation, that Mercury is starting to get fairly good in its own sign of rulership of Virgo at analyzing and figuring things out and working with the details. It's going to have more experience than if her Mercury would be at 14 degrees Virgo. If we put it in that 5th house, which the Sun rules, she's half a Sun in Leo. If you look at the house archetype, there brings in the creativity. One of the things that she wrote in her environmental conditionings is she wanted to get out of Winnipeg before she died. She wanted to travel. And by gosh, I'm looking at this Mercury Sun as I want that freedom. I want that freedom to create. I want that freedom to do. I want that freedom to grow and expand and 5th house play. Can you see how just those 2 planets have created in your world? Volunteer, Carrie, give me feedback, interact.
I always thought a lot of that went to my moon is Sagittarius.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You can think that, or you can think with a 4th house Pluto with the evolutionary intent of getting out there and creating a career. Those are all,
Even though it's 4th house?
yes, yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, yes. Just a little review here. Because we look at Pluto at the soul in evolutionary astrology. Wherever Pluto is by signs, the generation we're born into, where it is by house, Pluto in the 4th, you're a Cancer, 4th house soul, Pluto. That's
Mm-hmm.
where we gravitate to for security reasons. All right.
Oh, okay.
So,
Because it's near my IC as well, right?
yes. And so emotional sensitivity is there. Having your cocoon, no matter where you travel, is important to you. But we will
Mm-hmm.
look at the opposite planet in general as giving us the objectivity and the evolution of the natal planet. And this is particularly
Which opposite planet?
any planet.
Oh, okay.
We will look at the opposite sign and house of any planet for objectivity and evolution
Oh, okay.
to that natal archetype. specifically with Pluto. We call it the PPP, the Pluto Polarity Point. It represents specifically where our soul is intending to evolve in the current lifetime.
Oh, okay.
So, fourth house Plutos have 10th house lessons. They have lessons of learning to take charge of their own life. That's the psychology of the 10th house. We typically will do it through career, but it's not limited to career. It's just taking charge of our own life and being able to go out of the cocoon and into the
Okay,
world.
sorry. You said, oh, if my Pluto's in the fourth house
Mm-hmm.
and you go to the Pluto polarity point,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. No, that's,
New
I mean,
information?
oh, I can't do addition. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
It's
Okay.
okay. It's okay. Mercury and Virgo's going, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I could go out there right now. So what I wanted to point out, just, listening to the environmental conditioning that you gave me, is it's more your desire to travel, your desire to explore, to be free. It's not just that Sag moon. It's not
Mhm.
just the career lessons for a fourth house Pluto. It's also part of your Mercury new phase, your sun, in the fifth house of creativity. And then both of them being in Virgo, look at all of your technical training.
Yes.
Look at your curiosity, just reflect on probably all the very technical training that you had. You listed a couple of things, and I'm like, oh my, that takes a lot of concentration. Okay. So
Hmm.
as that Mercury is moving through new phase from the sun, the further the planet gets along in new phase, it starts to have that the random experiences start to narrow and focus. And so
Okay.
you're actually able to take that Mercury and focus it with the sun.
Excuse me, one question.
Hmm.
But you said my sun and my Pluto are 13 degrees apart.
Oh, I meant Mercury
But
and Sun. Mercury and Sun,
Mercury,
if I
yeah,
misspoke.
I
Sorry,
okay.
apologies. Yeah,
No, that's me.
anybody correct me,
But
because
but you mentioned that if it went to 14, it would that push just wouldn't be as great. Is that because they're farther apart? Is that what happens?
no, I'm talking specifically Mercury and Sun. Okay.
Oh, okay, sorry.
All right. No, I'm saying if your Mercury was 14 degrees and it was a new phase conjunction with the Sun,
Mm-hmm.
there may or may not be as much ability to focus.
Okay, okay, I get it now. Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
wondered.
Because it would be
Yep.
such a new conjunction aspect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That Mercury energy could be more, or a Mercury Virgo energy could be more scattered. As
Okay.
Mercury's moving 13 degrees beyond that sun,
Mm-hmm.
the randomness of experience is starting to narrow, which means as Mercury pulls away from the sun, it has more and more ability to start to focus mentally.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Everybody who's watching, if you are listening, you can check and see if your Mercury's ahead of the sun. And if it's ahead of the sun, how far ahead? You can start to see more. The more that Mercury pulls ahead of that sun, the more it actually has an ability to focus. Now, again, no absolutes here. We're just looking at two specific aspects. We're not taking a lot of the chart into consideration.
Yes. Yes.
And there is also the whole, the environmental conditionings, and there's that
Mhm.
evolutionary state of consciousness.
It was a big break from that one. To what I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. It is. And so if you can think Mercury to that sun mentally breaking free, your mind was just focused on, I've got to break free. I've got to be me. I mean, can you imagine a fourth house Pluto and 7 younger brothers? Part of me was going, wow, you decided to have children coming from that background.
It took a while.
There's that 5th house showing up. Yeah.
I wouldn't
So,
give them back now, but I wondered some days.
yeah. And so, Eileen, I will use your chart as more example. If you didn't see the email, I sent an email out late
Oh, yes, I saw the
last
email.
night
Thank you.
as to when we will actually use that. So if you want to mute yourself right now, what I want to
Yeah,
do
sure.
is
And thank you so much. That was very interesting because I put a whole different spin for me to look at things.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome. What I want to do with this first chart is actually kind of show you some of the math here. Okay. And so again, I'm specifically using Solar Fire software. Apologies if you use different software. I actually use WinStar. I've used WinStar for almost 35 years. No, I think longer than that. I was studying astrology for 2 years before EA. So, but I use Solar Fire a lot with PowerPoint slides. So here's the direction. So I'm going to give you a visual on this. So we're actually going to, I got to move this down, go out here. This is my niece. Her and Aunt Kimmy are very close. And so what we are going to do here is, whoops, excuse me.
Sorry, just to interrupt a
Mhm.
little bit, Kimberly. We are looking at a black screen. You may have just shared PowerPoint slide. I don't know if you're sharing your
No, I
screen.
took out. Okay, so here, let's do this.
Any
Thank you. Thank you. So I took out. Okay, so, okay, seeing it?
Yep.
Okay, we
Thank
opened up Solar Fire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly draw up this chart again for you just to show anybody who doesn't know how to do this. A simple way of knowing. Okay, Winnipeg. Oh, it already did it. And so I'm going to type it in again. Winnipeg, Manitoba. This person likes to use Placidus houses. Evolutionary astrology works with any house system. So you go in and you create the chart. You look up the chart. You go to reports. And then you go to the upper right here and you scroll down and you go to the difference listing. And sometimes the modulus, it can be set to various ways. You want to set it to 360 degrees. And so let's see if I can make this bigger. It's not going to let me make it bigger. I don't think I'm going to get anywhere if I make it bigger for you. Hopefully you can all see this on your screen. First of all, here is planetary sequences, moon to every planet, sun, Mercury, Venus, and you can see them listed by their degrees. And then you can scroll down here, and here it is sorted by angle. Here it is going from 0 degrees to 356 degrees. We were looking at sun with Mercury new phase to the sun at 13 degrees, 22 minutes. Here's where you can find that. And so sometimes you have to do the visual in regards to this. So if we started with Pluto to go to the sun, here it is right here, 17 degrees, 45 minutes. You wanted to look at Uranus, which to Pluto, you'd start with Pluto, you go all the way around the circle to Uranus. For me, I would scroll up here to Uranus to Pluto. Nope, that one says 29. I know it's balsamic, so I'm going to go Pluto to Uranus, 330 degrees and 58 minutes. That's their cycle. So you sometimes have to go back and forth through this listing, but it does the math for you. Love computers. I learned how to cast charts by hand back in the day. Computers were just coming out when I started studying astrology. So this is by far one of the easiest ways for you to do this printout. And those of you who do work with solar fire, you can do this printout for yourself right now, or you can do it in between, and you can have this for yourself later today. Okay, so reports, difference listing, 360-degree modulus. I am now going to go out of this and let ourselves get through there. And so if you're not seeing my PowerPoint slides again, interrupt me, Judy. I think I might have done it correctly this time. We're a little slower as we're getting started. We'll start to pick up a little speed. We just have beginning things that we have to do in regards to this. Okay, so let's see if it goes now. Let me click here. And so the next aspect that we're going to start to run into is 30 degrees, the semi-sextile. And so when two planets, when that faster moving planet gets 30 degrees beyond the slower moving planet, there starts to be a formation of a conscious and egocentric identification with whatever that new cycle is between these two planets. With Venus to Mars, it would be identification with, this is how I want to explore being in relationship. Or this is Venus, what I value, that I'm starting to get clarity on how I want to act. Mars, in new ways. New values are arriving for me. And so the further along we get in new phase, and especially from 30 to 45 degrees, as I said before, those random actions and experiences are going to start narrowing. We're going to start being able to focus those two planets a little easier compared to that new phase conjunction aspect that is going to be all over the place. So the soul begins to sense specific directions that allow discovery and realization of what that new evolutionary cycle is between those two planets. The next aspect we're going to look at is called the noville. This is where we take 360, divide it by 9, and we get 40. Now, that 40 exists in 80, 120, the trine. It exists all the way through the cycle. It starts to get really finite. It is something you could say, quote unquote, advanced astrology, work with the harmonics of 9 and see how many 40-degree aspects you have between planets. We typically just work with it in new phase and balsamic phase because it's kind of hanging out there by itself, so to speak. The 80 degrees can get caught up in the 90-degree square, etc. But the noville, that harmonics of 9, it's known as gestation. So if you want to work with those 40-degree marks, you think of them as being gestating relative to whatever phase that harmonics of 40 degrees falls into. In new phase, it literally is the gestation process of conscious and egocentric awareness of the new cycle. In other words, it's like an aha. I get it. It's like being 6-7 months pregnant. You're not giving birth yet, but whoa, there's a baby inside. I feel it. So there starts to be a subjective growth towards actualizing that new evolutionary cycle. And we want to give it personal meaning. So we're aware more and more and more that we're moving in new directions that are very personal. It's a sense of self-discovery. And of course, as we've been saying all along here, there is a narrowing and a narrowing of random experience. I told you I'm specifically trying to choose aspects and phasal degrees that are not all the common aspects that we learn in general astrology so that we can be expanding our awareness here. And so we're going to give example with this, okay? And so Miss Chris, you are going to be my example here for the novelle aspect. Actually, I'm going to use your chart for both of the novelle aspects if you're wondering why you're in new phase and balsamic phase. Hi, sweetie.
Hi, honey. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you gave me a few new tidbits that I did not know. Only child, Eastern European refugees who really weren't quite successful integrating into Canadian society, grew up lower class, had some fundamentalist religious imprinting, including 15 years in cult. Um, Entrepreneur most of your life, ran a mid-sized business. I think there was 100+ employees or something for 4 decades. Long-term marriage, 4 children, 4 grandchildren. Your second oldest child suicide in 2012. My sympathies for you, honey, in regards to that. The
Yeah.
example that I want to use here for you is Saturn in a noville aspect to Pluto. Their
Yeah.
differentiation is actually 39 degrees, 14 minutes. So Saturn is just approaching that noville 40-degree mark to Pluto. And so we are looking at an Aquarius soul here on an 11th house Pluto. As you can see with a chart that has a Libra rising of about 10 degrees, planets are many times in a sign that is opposite of its natural house. That tends to lend itself to the soul coming in and instinctively throughout its life searching for objectivity. So we have the objectivity of an Aquarius soul or 11th house Pluto. That's part of the soul lessons and that awareness of the group. But your Pluto Leo and your polarity point is over there in that 5th house. I have to be me through this group. I have to express myself regardless of how the group that I exist in is participating. And I say group in very, very broad terms. If we look at a planetary pair between Saturn and Pluto, we are looking at evolving the structure of consciousness, Saturn, within the soul and to the depth of the soul. And so if we look at Saturn, excuse me, I touched my little mouse here. Julie, I'm going to pause right here. I sometimes have a tendency to put on my little laser point. So if I can have feedback, do you see me well enough when I use my mouse, or would you like me to go through using a little red PowerPoint that points out a little more? Let me just,
It looks okay to me,
does
but
it?
yeah, however you feel like, or if somebody wanted to unmute, it's okay. But I did get
Yes.
noticed that your voice was getting a little choppy for Jackie, and mine is it just breaks a little bit. But I think it's internet connection, and It's unfortunately not something that we can fix.
Yeah,
I hope at least,
it's going to
yeah,
be the internet connection. Here
yes,
is what I was speaking about. If this is a little more, sometimes this tends to be a little brighter for people when they're looking at that. I'll start going back and forth with this, and hopefully it's not going to be too cumbersome in regards to us. So, as we were speaking, when we look at a planetary pair of Saturn and Pluto, the soul is evolving its structure of consciousness, Saturn, the individuated boundaries of what we can consciously be aware of, and our maturation in society, how we activate our own inner authority, and then how we then activate our authority in society is Saturn. Regardless if we're in individuated or spirituated states of consciousness, we don't, for the most part, live in isolation from the consensus world. We hold consensus in our arms. If you remember my circles that I showed you earlier with evolutionary states. So when we have Saturn moving into the noville aspect with Pluto, there's a real strong gestation of blossoming the new ways our soul wants to create its authority on deep levels out there in the world. And we will look at the 11th house Pluto having, awareness of society and groups for the most part. Also, though, coming through alienation, 11th house Plutos can sometimes feel that they're always on the outside looking in. And it's because an Aquarius soul has to learn how to individualize and be a group of one before it finds the group that it fits into. And so you can look here with this Saturn and the South Node new phase conjunction. Okay, planets conjunct the South Node in EA have three possibilities. Relive. We didn't quite get something in a past life. We've got to come in, re-experience it, redo it. Second possibility, fruition. We put so much prior effort in a prior life that it blossoms, it manifests. Those two possibilities are typically rare. The third possibility, most common, a mixture of relive and fruition. And so we'll look at that South Node new phase Saturn and we'll think, oh, this person has really been having to deal with issues from the past South Node and really work upon its maturation and authority. And we've got that mixture of Virgo 12th house. Look back to the environmental conditioning, a fundamentalist, background growing up, the cult energy. You can see the experiences that the soul has relived in here in regards to what do I believe on the deepest levels. And we will look at Virgo Pisces 6/12 in EA as all of the sadomasochistic patriarchal distortions that we have been imprinted with for thousands of years with consensus religion. So, right there, you see that background. But what I want to point out to you with this noville gestation aspect is look at what this person has done in her life. She has been an entrepreneur most of her life. She ran a pretty big size business. That Saturn may have been a little shy in that 12th house from time to time, but there was that energy of new phase that she had to break free and really do something out there in the world. She had to become her own authority. She had to become authority in her world with work and career. Do you agree, Chris? Does this feel anything you can add?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on, Kim. And of course, all aspects of my life kind of follow that pattern. Whatever I took up was infused with
huge amounts of karma, karmic memory, and actually I made it my own. And it's the same thing with EA, right?
Yeah.
You know my history there as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was one of the in that group that was taught by Jeffrey, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that wasn't an accident. I mean that was the soul seeking that individualized expression.
Yes. 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 Totally. Totally. So thank you for letting me look at your chart. We're going to come back to the 320 noville um,
Uh-huh.
in the balsamic phase, and we'll look at two other planets then in
Okay.
that noville phase to it. So thank you for allowing me to quickly point your chart out. I appreciate that. And so I'm conscious of time. I'm going to quickly do one more aspect, okay? Because then we will, oops, nope, I gotta figure this out. Okay, got it. Because this is the last aspect in this phase, all right? And so this is when we're looking at two planets that are just shy of 45 degrees, but they're starting to get into that semi-square aspect. It's still new phase. It's that energy that I talked about before and after the 45 degree or harmonics of 8, where the energy's changing. So this is kind of like a transitional evolutionary gate between any two planets in which they are literally going from new phase to crescent phase. So, with this side of the aspect, there's a conflict because we still want new experience. That energy is yang. We still want to keep moving. And yet, as we get closer and closer and closer to the 45 degree between the two planets, there's a slowing down. The energy starts to consolidate, starts to internalize, and it starts to pull us inward as we are moving towards crescent phase and the energy turning yin. So when you see any two planets in a semi-square, first of all, you have to determine, is the faster moving planet in new phase? And if it is, and it's 44, 43, 45 degrees, there's a lot of frustration and tension there. And um, it's just as active as a square and an opposition. Remember that. So I would invite you to explore this with your own chart. If you work with clients, spend some time just looking up the semi-squares and sesquisquadrates in charts and kind of play with that energy to start to know that. All right, so at this point, I am going to turn off the recorder, and unless there's any burning questions with anything we've discussed so far. If there is, mute yourself, ask. Otherwise, we're going to pause for break. All right, so I am now going to end the recording.